All right, so if you could start the live stream. Thank you. So I will go to each councillor present in turn to confirm that they can hear and be heard. This is a legal requirement for me to do so. Where practicable, please have your video switched on so you can be seen by those in attendance and the public watching. So I'll begin with the committee members. Councillor Jenny Bartlett, can you hear?
Yes, Chair, I can hear and see you.
Fantastic, thank you. Councillor Sebastian Bowen.
I can hear and see you, Madam Chairman.
Fantastic. Councillor Helen Ironson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I can hear and see you.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Price.
Was here just recently.
Muted. I'm unmuted now. I can hear you. You.
Thank you, Councillor Price. I can hear and see you. Councillor Alan Selden.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. I can hear and see you.
Thank you, and welcome to the committee. A very welcome new addition to our committee. Councillor Kevin Tillett.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can hear and see you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tillett. So I would also like to request that members and officers in attendance also confirm that they can hear and be heard. So it'll be Councillor Pauline Crockett, Cabinet Member Health and Wellbeing.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can hear and see you.
Thank you. I don't believe that we have Councillor Hitchener present yet. No, thank you. Officers, Ben Ball.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kate Coftree.
Thank you, Chair. I can hear and see you.
Thank you, and I can hear and see you. Do you have Marie Gallagher? No. Okay. Mr. Ball?
No, I believe Marie hasn't joined us, but
okay.
I believe she might well be watching live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jenny Priest?
Yes, I can hear you, Chair, and see you.
Thank you very much. Paul Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can hear and see you.
Thank you very much. Laura Tyler?
Thank you, Chair. I can hear and see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stephen Vickers?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Thank you very much. And representing Health Watch Herefordshire, Ian Stead. Just take yourself off mute, Mr. Stead.
Yes to both. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much and welcome. So welcome to this meeting of Adults Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee being held on Monday, 23rd of November. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making an official recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible, keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you are not speaking. Procedure and etiquette for the meeting. If any attendee loses connection and it is not possible to recover the connection within a reasonable amount of time, the meeting will continue as long as a quorum of committee members remains able to hear the proceedings and to be heard. When you wish to speak, please use the blue hand button against your name in the participants list, which should be on the right of your screens. I will then invite you to speak in order of the hands being raised. Voting will be undertaken electronically using the voting software within the virtual meeting platform. Only committee members may vote. In the event that an electronic voting is not possible to use or there is a technical failure, I will ask each committee member by means of a roll call to indicate that they are for, against or abstaining. The results of the roll call will only be recorded in the minutes where there is requirement to do so. And I notice we've now been joined by Ewan Archibald. So if I just could confirm that Ewan, you can hear and be heard.
Sorry, Councillor, having trouble unmuting. Yes, I can see and hear you clearly.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Have any apologies been notified to the clerk?
All committees members are present, Chair. Councillor Watson, Cabinet Support Member for Adults and Communities, has forwarded her apologies there.
Thank you very much. So there are no named substitutes. Do any members wish to declare any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or any other interests in the agenda item? No, thank you. The minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of September 2020 are included in the agenda at pages 9 to 18 for approval. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer, so I will ask committee members to confirm that they agree the minutes by an electronic vote. Non-voting attendees will be moved to a breakout room for a few moments. They will be returned to the meeting room when all eligible votes have been cast. Please can non-voting attendees now be moved out of the meeting room and the number of voting members be confirmed.
Chair, there are 7 voting members.
Thank you. And can we have the voting screen? Thank you. Committee members, please cast your vote either for, against or abstain. Please ensure you press submit after selecting the option for which you are voting.
Chair, all members have voted. 6 in favour to approve and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Understood. Thank you. Thank you. And can non-voting attendees now be brought back into the meeting room, please? And welcome back. Agenda item number 5, questions from members of the public. Members of the public have the opportunity to submit questions in writing to the committee ahead of the meeting. On this occasion, no questions have been received from members of the public. Agenda item number 6, questions from councillors. On this occasion, no questions have been received from councillors. Agenda item number 7, briefing on the Herefordshire Market Position Statement 2020 to 2025 for adults and communities. So can I invite Laura Tyler, Head of Care Commissioning, to introduce the report, please?
Yes, of course. Afternoon all, and thank you for taking the time to have a look at the document. So today I'm presenting the draft market position statement for 2020-2025. It's replacing our previous market position statement, and I'm asking the committee to review and scrutinise it and to ensure that really what we've got is the right strategic direction for Adults and Communities Directorate, and that the committee also has basically we've got it position right. Sorry, wrong bit in my report. So the market position statement is it's not a statutory document, but it's something that as a local authority, it's really good practice. Most local authorities will have a market position statement. And what it does is essentially aimed at providers to really give them a steer in terms of what our strategic approach will be, and what I suppose our demand is going to be moving forward. So it's really for them to look at how they will align their businesses and align their business plans for the future to meet that demand locally. It's obviously as part of our strategy, as part of our strategic direction is around ensuring that we do meet our own Care Act responsibilities to manage the market. So that won't be just the areas that the local authority is commissioning, that is the market as a whole. This market position is much more diverse than the previous one. And I think you'll see from the work that's gone into it that it's much wider in its approach. It's very much focused on community commissioning within the communities, aligning to our strength-based approach, aligning to looking at how technology can be built as part of the response, and looking at how we can, basically the preventative side of the work that we're doing. The work that we've done is very much moving away from the formal end of care. So you'll see from the previous market position statement, it was very focused on the formal end of care. So very much focused on the high end, which I would describe as the the care home placements and the domiciliary care. This one's much more wider and really focusing on the all ages commissioning and how we can look at preventative work rather than being reactive, which is something that's is really key focus for us. The work is around how we can ensure that we are managing that demand coming through, and you'll see throughout the document some of the trend and the data work that we've done, and you'll see that how the numbers will increase because we've obviously got an aging demographic, and we've obviously got as part of that we'll bring in increased demand on services as we move forward. So it's really critical that we look at alternative models of support and look at alternative ways of supporting all of the community, and making sure that we do get the right choice and the right quality and the right services in the place across the county. One of the areas that we are very focused on is trying to look much more on a locality-based commissioning response. We've started doing that already with some of the care home work that we're doing in line with some of our colleagues across the health agenda. And it's something that we're quite keen on doing. And as we move forward, we're looking to do very similar work with the domiciliary care support. But essentially, the document, as I said, is very much around prevention and demand management. What we're trying to do is look at how we get the providers to align to a strength-based ethos as well. So whilst we look at what the needs are of the individuals, we're trying to get inciting to the market that that's what we want them to be doing too. We want them to be moving to how they can meet the needs of individuals rather than the kind of labelling thing that we've still got with the many providers where they will only support people with a learning disability, for example, and looking at how we can ensure these services are accessible for all. Obviously, the Talk Community Agenda's got quite a lot of focus within the document because that's, in terms of the wider directorate strategy, that's the move that we're trying to move into. And as I talked about, technology is another area. It's important to say that as part of this document, which we never really had before, we've tried to develop the commissioning strategies as well. So you'll see at the end of the document, there's a table where we've got our commissioning intentions, which is really key for us as we move forward. Will give us commissioners a real focus on what we're doing over the next couple of years. The document also is the first time that we've moved more to an all ages approach. And I think I reflect within the report that, this document is a first step towards much closer alignment to children and young people too. So they've also contributed to these commissioning intentions. And as we move forward, we're going to, obviously, we have been developing some of the projects together. Alongside this document, what we will have is an online page that will sit within the Understanding Herefordshire section of the web pages, very much aimed at providers, which will be much more live and have the information coming through around some of the data, some of the gaps and some of the areas by locality. So that's something that we're working on alongside this, and working with children and young people to do a lot of that work, as well as health as well. The document, as you've seen it, is the draft that went out to providers and to stakeholders. So hopefully wanting the committee to have a look at the draft and an input into that. So it's just worth pointing out that that's the case at the moment. It's not a final draft. We've got to embed some of the comments from the wider providers and from our stakeholders within that. But ultimately, I've had a look at some of those, the feedback so far. I don't think it will change hugely. And where there will be probably changes will be, again, in the commissioning intentions action plan area. Probably run right through that very quickly. Is there any questions?
Not so far. Oh, Councillor Selden has a hand up.
Thank you.
Councillor Selden.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Chair. scanning through the document, it's lots of work obviously got into it, Laura, and well done on that. But I have a lot of questions. I mean, I noticed one point we came down to there being a full strategy. I can't remember what page it's on, but and I vividly remember my first ever meeting of the Adult Social Care Committee some 13 years ago, and one of the first topics on the agenda was a full strategy on how we keep people out of, well, people stop people from falling over, basically. And I'm just wondering, fast forward 13 years, and here we are discussing the same thing again about keeping people out of social care and preventing them from falling, and the number of people we are expecting to fall. And I'm just wondering, how that's gone. Did we abandon the previous strategy, or is this is something that's new, that's come in? One of the overriding themes right through the document is our reliance on partners. And I have to admit, from my own experience as the ward member for Bromyard West, the resilience of the primary care networks is something that concerns me greatly. And I'm just wondering if you would comment on the resilience as you see it of the primary care networks to be able to continue to function, certainly in the current environment. And I think the document is drawn up, the meat of it was drawn up before COVID, is that correct? Yeah, okay. So that sort of explains that. So I think maybe then there needs to be a bit of work done somewhere on looking at that resilience. And on the same subject then, as we're moving forward into looking at the care home providers, who again are our partners, we are heavily reliant on. I'm just looking at some of the data coming in from elsewhere in the country about the resilience of our care home networks. So some comments on those to start with, Chair, if I may come back later. I might have some other questions might have dawned on me by then. Thank you.
So just to pick up the falls side of things, I think what we've reflected on recently, over the last 6 months, is that there's a lot of projects and a lot of work around the fall provision. And what I think we all acknowledge, and I know Stephen's been leading on this from an STP area, and actually it's got one of the project manager working on this area at the moment, is that it just needs that review and pulling into, and aligning some of those areas. So, for example, we've got many different commission services. So CCG might commission some of the falls areas, the local authority might commission other services. And it's about how we now take stock and actually unpick that and look at what that pathway and what that area looks like. And I mean, I don't know whether Stephen wants to comment on that any further, but just acknowledging that, there's been a lot of work around the falls provision and a lot of learning about what works and what doesn't. And it's just really about now looking at exactly what we do and making sure that that preventative area, with particularly for the falls, is embedded, because we've been very reactive and responsive. So we might have a fall service that will pick people up, but is that ensuring that we've got those services in place that actually supports and prevents them from falling in the first place, and making sure that you've got, even like these exercise classes and strengthening and core support for individuals is really, really important, and making sure that that's available for people at a real local level. So there's a lot of work going around on the fall side of things at the moment, and that's, as I said, that's currently under review. So that may change in terms of what that might look like as we move forward. In terms of the resilience, I think resilience is a really key word. It's interesting. I mean, I spoke about it the other day around whether we need to acknowledge a bit more of the COVID area within the strategy or not. It's a really difficult one. So I know I have put it into the introduction but essentially what I'm saying as part of the work that we're doing is that we are continually working with the provider sector on this. I mean, we have weekly communications with them. We're doing resilience planning, business continuity planning with them continuously. So we've got a really good handle on what is going on within the sector, I feel anyway. And so, and I don't know if it changes when I've looked and reviewed the long-term goals and the long-term aspirations of the actual documents. I'm not sure at this stage whether COVID will impact on that at the moment, but that's not to say we don't know at this stage. You know, a lot of the resilience work that, you know, or business continuity planning should have been in place prior to COVID, but clearly there's been, you know, obviously additional, you know, I suppose pressure upon the market. In terms of, I mean, in relation to the care homes, again, that's a big focus, and I think you'll see that within the document. But the resilience within the care homes and about how we support them, you know, as we move forward, they've taken up, you know, it's the care home sector has been probably the most hit out of all of the sectors in terms of the COVID, and as you know, it's been on the national press. It's certainly been, we've been hit locally. The providers are working really well with us in terms and with the whole system, and we're really pleased with the work that they've done to try and protect, you know, the most vulnerable people. They're absolutely dedicated. And it's about, you know, how do we've been, I think Herefordshire in particular, when we're looking at some of the, in comparison to some of our regional and national peers, the care home market in terms of, you know, particularly around placements has been not so impacted as some other areas have seen with their care homes. So we're fortunate from that perspective. But what that long term, what that I suppose, even what that short to medium term impact will be on the care homes at the moment is a difficult one to know. But that is something obviously we're dealing with on a daily basis and working with them really hard to ensure that their business continuity plans are robust, and the support is there as a system for the homes. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, thank you. There's quite a lot of them. I mean, and I think maybe looking forward, members, that there may be some work for this committee to do to ensure that resilience within the care home market is maintained. And I acknowledge that Herefordshire is better placed than most, but that's partly down to our diverse and spread out sparse population. But looking at I think it's the chart on page 9, where on the right hand chart it's suddenly gone blue. The numbers of people that we're expecting to reach over the age of 65 in the next 3 years, and it was actually quite frightening. And whether or not we will continue to have the capacity to deal with that going forward, I think it's something perhaps that we as a committee should look at in the future. I don't get a clear sense that we have good feeding into the primary care networks, and that my experience of working within the primary care networks is that perhaps they can be a little secretive about their about the way they operate and what the reality of their situation is. And without calling them before the committee and asking them questions, I think that it's very difficult for you and for officers to find out exactly what's going on within the primary care network. So as a recommendation forming in my head that around this document, we should perhaps call somebody from the primary care networks before the committee and ask them some questions about how resilient they think they are, and then hold their feet to the fire should it fall over. I'll leave it for other members to question. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Stephen. Just picking up on obviously the increasing numbers with that we, you know, and the demand that we're probably going to see on the care home sector. And I'm hoping that the document also kind of demonstrates some of the thinking around how we're going to address some of that, thinking of the different models and the different approaches, because, you know, we cannot sustain that increase. You know, it would break, you know, the local authorities' budgets completely if that is sustained. And, you know, when it's thinking about, and obviously you, as you're aware, looking at how we maybe insource our own services and develop our own services is quite key to that. Looking at how we develop live-in care offer, looking at how we develop the shared lives offer, looking at how we also develop the supported accommodation offer as we move forward is really key to try and managing that demand, because we can't, you know, the demand for that will outweigh what we've currently got in the system otherwise.
I was saving comments on the budget until the budget discussions that are coming.
Yes, it'll come soon enough. So, Mr. Smith, I think you want to come in on that if you care to comment.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thank you, and thanks to Councillor Selden for reading the document and digesting the content and asking some relevant questions. Appreciated. I'll come back on a few of the points if that's okay. I won't talk about the falls response because I know Mr. Vickers is running a comprehensive project on behalf of the system around that particular issue. So I'll leave that to Mr. Vickers to discuss. But in terms of the, let's take the PCNs initially. I think your comments around the PCNs and the operation of the PCNs were very valid. And what I would say is perhaps we're in a different place than we were a few months ago. Still not where we need to be. But I think that one of the huge advantages and completely unforeseen of COVID is that the system working is vastly improved. As a result, out of necessity, absolutely. Because as health and social care partners, we've had no option but to really integrate as much as possible and work as closely as possible to ensure that citizens are supported and protected, and that providers also. Our relationship with the PCNs is much stronger now than it ever was. And in fact, only recently we've moved into a position where we now hold PCN provider forums. So we have a provider forum with all of the care providers specifically in each PCN, which is co-chaired by health and local authorities on a cycle basis. So we chair one meeting and the NHS chairs the next. That's an additional layer of provider support that we've been able to integrate as part of COVID. So that's worked very well. And you'll be aware, no doubt, of the PCN work around the Enhanced Health in Care Home programme, which is a government piece of legislation that the CCGs and the NHS are now commissioning predominantly GP federations to deliver. The Enhanced Health in Care programme in Herefordshire is now being jointly delivered by the local authority in Taurus, and I and myself and Laura are heavily involved with the delivery of the Enhanced Health in Care Home programme, supporting Taurus and the NHS around that, and that is predominantly a PCN issue. And that is now reported at the Transition Board for progress. So the Transition Board, which is the system board, attended by Mr. Vickers and the chief execs of the NHS locally, receives an update on the work of the PCNs and the work of the Enhanced Health and Care Home programme. So I'm hoping there's more assurance now than there was. And I can personally say that my view of the PCNs has altered more recently because they've become more forthcoming in their approach, and they've been working with us a lot closer than perhaps they were previously. So that's to be welcomed. And just quickly on the care home position, you've rightly pointed out that Herefordshire is in an unusual position as a county. We have over 80 homes. 95% of them are owner managed and owned by small local providers. So we have very few nationals. So our position in terms of the sustainability is very different than most of the UK, because most of the UK, even in quite a lot of the rural areas, is densely populated by national providers with incredibly complex and very unsustainable financing models, such as venture capitalism. And in many instances, care home providers' margins are so small that a very small dip in occupancy can bring them to a point of collapse, as we saw with Southern Cross 4 or 5 years ago. And of course, we're very conscious of that. And so we do monitor our care home sustainability incredibly carefully. As Laura did say, we host a weekly provider forum that I chair. So we meet with providers every week. We engage with them in between those weeks in writing with all guidance. We provide all support to them that's recommended by government and also that we decide locally. You'll be aware that we enhanced payments to care homes during the summer, the pandemic, by 10% using the government funding for COVID. We've recently mobilised and allocated the infection control grant to care home providers, giving them a further layer of support in terms of finances. And there is an open door policy. Every provider that runs a care home in Herefordshire has my private direct line, my mobile number and my email address, and can contact me at any point should they have concerns. And as a county, I also would just give an observation to the board that the way that we supported care homes in Herefordshire throughout the pandemic and continue to do so was so well recognised and applauded by our regional colleagues that Herefordshire, although one of the smallest, if not the smallest counties in the West Midlands, now hosts and chairs the West Midlands Provider Forum. So we were asked, because of our performance with care homes, we were asked to chair the regional meetings, and I now chair a regional provider forum with all of the other councils in the West Midlands, and I also chair a weekly meeting with care home providers that is also regional in focus. So we're in a really strong position, but of course, our issue in Herefordshire is what it's always been, in that capacity is always a problem, because Herefordshire Council is not the biggest purchaser of care in care homes. The self-funders are the biggest purchaser in Herefordshire. And this is why we've obviously got the very well established and the quickly to be progressed £14 million capital scheme to build our own care home, because one of the things that the pandemic has brought home to us is that we cannot be wholly reliant on the independent sector for provision. We must have a mixed economy. And of course, building our own care homes and commissioning them ourselves and delivering that service ourselves gives us an additional point of assurance, because of course, it is pretty unlikely that one of our own homes will become unsustainable financially or from a quality perspective, because of course we know how to deliver that service incredibly well. So with the support of operations, I think as commissioning, we are working incredibly in an incredibly detailed and targeted way around the care home sector. And if you'd like further assurance, of course we can provide that. But we're in a strong position, and we're fighting way above our weight in terms of Herefordshire, in terms of the size of the county and the way that the resources that we have. So I hope that provides some additional assurance, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks very much, if I may, Chair. Paul, thanks so much for that. I just wonder whether the committee would feel that they need some also extra assurance, and my concern revolves around the fragmented nature of the health sector that we're working in. And we've got the primary care, we've got the CCG, we've got CQC lurking in the background, and I'm just wondering whether we've ever had CQC in to tell us what they feel about Herefordshire. And it's really good to hear you that you're chairing that group, Paul. But so clearly we are boxing above our weight. And you know, I think all the committee, I would hope, would want was some little more assurance on behalf of the relationships between these people, because the whole of this sector is reliant on relationships between people, and making sure that they don't fall out about any aspect of what's going on. And I just think that we have a pivotal role to play in ensuring all that. On the primary care provision, Bromyard has I think one of the largest primary care providers. I think we've got 9,500 or over 9,500 people on the books at the non-well surgery. And I know that one GP takes nearly all their time in going out to the 4 care homes in that sector. And that's a huge resource for them to have to put out. And I don't think there's anything we can do that as a council, but it's something that we need to be aware of looking forward at the advancing demographic. I will shut up now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Councillor Selton. Mandy Appleby's, do you want to come in there?
Well, I was only going to, I mean, not if you want to move on, but I was sort of thinking about what's been raised here, and from an operational context, it's probably, I think, particularly over the last year, but even more so through the COVID period, I mean, operations has always had that relationship with the Primary Care Trust and our partners, but I think it's vastly improved actually, and is in a much more resilient place than it was even a year ago. And whether it's sort of from a Falls perspective, or from whether it's a care home perspective, or through individual cases, I think that relationship is far more advanced. I mean, we reset our boundaries, you know, over a year ago now, so that social care is, you know, our teams match their boundaries so that we can work on a PCN basis. So we're attending multidisciplinary team meetings. We're attending locality hub meetings in relating to care homes, and bringing forward a lot of you know, skills and knowledge that we've got regarding all these elements. I think in the past, you talked about, Councillor, 12 years ago. I think we're in such a different and new world now from then. At one point, operations would have been only talking to operations in the primary care sector, and we wouldn't have had necessarily commissioning on board. Now in this new world, it's very much, and I think the strengths-based project has brought this, that we, and talk community as well, there is an interdependence between departments and between agencies. I think there's a huge changing paradigm in how we're approaching community-based care, and I think everybody sees that as the way forward.
Thank you. Yes, I would agree with you. It seems to me there's a tremendous kind of alignment of the stars, as it were, coming in with talk community and strengths-based approach, scientific safety. This is a philosophy that's
absolutely.
That's
And we've got now
decisions.
integrated parties that even when we were seconded as an operational service into health, our integrated pathway now is probably the best it's ever been to manage people's discharges, whether it's home, whether it's to a reablement bed, a rehab bed, or whether it's to a care home bed. You know, most at the moment, over 80% of people go home without support, but for that small amount of people that, relatively speaking, that need a formal type of care, we've got a much better throughput and much better quality outcomes for people, is my belief. That's the way forward for me.
Thank you. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, and good discussion so far about the wider elements. So yeah, I mean, this is a huge piece of work, and well done, Laura, because the old one really was quite narrow-minded and quite technically boringly stated, without being too rude about it. So just sort of drilling down into the document itself. So the 2 or 3 things struck me, and one that I know we've talked about before. Really, I'd like to see that we make some stronger links with the social value areas that the council are moving into. So you've referenced the county plan, and you've referenced climate change, and so really both in the officers and report and within the document, it would be quite good to have a specific reference. I know it turns up in a couple of places, certainly within the commissioning intentions on page 60 at point 8. But if we could make more of that, would that be a recommendation?
Yes, certainly we can pick that up. Yeah.
And so that was my first one and my first starter, if that's okay, Chair, if I can come back again towards the end. And then again, on the document itself, on page 51, where it talks about, page 51? Yeah, so page 51, it talks, in addition to the, when it talks about mental health provider change, it needs to be updated a bit because we've gone through that change. And so again, if we could sort of recommend that as well. And I think as well, the dementia strategy as well is actually live now, isn't it? So if we could bring it up to date before we do this. I know this is a bit technically boring in terms of going through the document. So that would be another recommendation, I think, really, that we bring it up to date. On page 57, there's a really good part about the adult social care survey, and I know we talked before about whether or not this had been to care users for their feedback on how we're doing, and it's really good to hear some of this, and you've got to the end of the section says the voice of the residents and the wider workforce will be a key capture to future design principles and delivery. So somewhere along the line, I'd quite like to hear a bit more about how that's going to be done, whether that belongs in this document or whether that belongs maybe in a year's time when it comes, hopefully it will come back to, the review will come back to scrutiny, maybe in the form of a briefing note, but to hear about that. But also you've given the indicators, but it doesn't give any indication about how many people have been asked and sort of the wider the wider satisfaction with what we're doing. And the other, just I suppose slightly, just going through the document part of my questions, on page 59, on commissioning intention 3, you've got increase and improve services that support complex and challenging behaviours such as autism and dementia. And I'm thinking that possibly should include learning disabilities as well, because they don't seem to be within any of the commissioning intentions otherwise. So I'd recommend that we include learning disabilities in there as well. So, Chair, that's my just going through the document, picking up on things that I think we should include, and the general, if it's going to be reviewed in a year's time, could we have a briefing note on how they're getting on in a year's time, so that we're all happy that it's, you know, it looks like it's going to work really well, but we're all happy that it is. So they're my kind of recommendation picky bits, and thank you. Can I come back later with some generalities? Thank you.
Of course, thank you for the recommendations, which I'm sure we've captured. I think Mr. Smith, you want to comment on that? Paul?
Yeah, if I may come back, Chair, just very quickly around the customers and the service users' voice. Very, very good point made by Councillor Bartlett. And of course, any commissioner that designs services without listening to their customers, and that's how I see our clients, I have to say, will design services that are of no use to anybody. So absolutely valid point, Councillor. You'll be aware, perhaps, that quite recently, we in commissioning have sort of taken the reins of the Making It Real board, and we've increased the visibility of that board and made it more regular. It's now every month rather than every quarter, and we have better attendance because it's virtual than when we had a physical meeting. Interestingly, I guess if you've got a disability, it's much easier to attend a meeting virtually than it would be to perhaps book a taxi or transport to Plough Lane, etc. So interestingly, COVID has resulted in a better attendance and more diverse attendance at Making It Real board. So as a result of that, I have committed to Making It Real board that, of course, one of their primary purposes is to be the voice of the customer and the voice of the service user, to influence specification and design, and to also influence how we commission services. So whilst the commissioning intentions and the market position statement is a provider-facing document effectively, and a market-facing document, of course, the services that come out of the commissioning direction will then result in service specifications and contracts, which we then procure or commission services against. And at that point is when the service user voice and the customer's voice will be heard in the design of service specifications and contracts, because ultimately it isn't a generalist thing. People have life experience and are subject matter experts in each of their own areas of interest. So, of course, people that maybe are physically disabled will influence those areas, and people that are sensory disabled will influence those areas. So we have a full intention and absolute commitment to ensure that the Making It Real board is our platform for customer and service user voice. And of course, we have Healthwatch on the call. You, again, as councillors may be aware that we've recently retendered and reallocated the contract for Healthwatch. And I'll make no secret of my pleasure that, and Mr. Stead will hear this, that the existing Healthwatch were retained, and we did manage to go out to a fair tender, but the existing Healthwatch organisation was successful. I'm very pleased about that. They're very active in commissioning, and there is a regular contact with Healthwatch, who of course will put forward the service user's voice on behalf of people within the community, and both from a health and social care perspective. So there's a lot of work that will take place and does take place. But this is a provider-facing document. But don't at all be absolutely assured that the other side of the coin, effectively, the service user and the customer's voice, will be just as important and is just as important in the design of services going forward. And in fact, just as a classic example of that, councillors may be aware that we are designing a disabled assessment centre, which we're going to place in Hillside. And Mr Vickers has kindly asked the Making It Real board to be part of the engagement and consultation on that piece of work. So when we design that centre, people with disabilities who may well be customers of that centre at some point will influence the design of that. And that was an invite to the Making It Real board, which they've enthusiastically taken up, I have to say. So we'll be providing that information back through. So I hope that again provides a bit more assurance, perhaps, than the document reflects.
Thank you, Mr Smith. So next is Councillor Tillett.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to raise what seemed to me to be a missing element from this document, although perhaps I should preface it with the caveat that, as is not uncommon with this committee, it is a lengthy and dense document, so it is possible that I have overlooked this. But back earlier in the year, the council voted on an additional £13.1 million to be set aside to explore the possibility, the opportunities for the council to build and develop its own care facility. And I cannot see any obvious reference to that. We're now, best part of a year further forward from that. And given that this document is looking at the next 5 years, I would have expected at least some expression of intention of perhaps how that was going to be developed, possibly what scoping has already been done, and particularly, as Councillor Selden raised at the beginning, about the very diverse nature of care provision and maybe some of the fragility in particularly private sector resilience. My understanding was that this plan for this £13.1 million was in part to answer that. And as I say, I just feel that in a document that is for the next 5 years, that there should at least be some explicit reference to that and how that might alter things over the next 5 years. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I think I acknowledge that actually that's it. I haven't explicitly commented on the care home bit. My son's going to jump in here in a minute, so apologies if he makes a noise. He's just come home from school. But it's not, yeah, absolutely. And I think what I've done is I probably made it as an overarching statement to talk about how the local authority is going to start looking at developing its own services and in-house and looking at how we explore that moving forward. So I think what I've probably done is just made explicit, just made that note on there, but not made reference to the actual care home. And I absolutely agree with you. And I think that is something that somebody else has raised as well, which does need to be known and acknowledged. So, that's something I think we should put in there to make that explicit statement to say this is what the local authority is looking to do. Because it does, it's the trend, you can see the demand there, we know we need it. So I think absolutely, it's a really good point, it's a really valid point, and it's come back as part of the feedback as well from others. So I do accept that as a point that we need to make that really clear.
Thank you. Councillor Ianson.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I've written a few things down, so forgive me if I jiggle about a bit. First of all, I welcome the all ages approach. I think that's really good. And also, I think the glossary at the back is very helpful. but there's some things like phrases like home and family can be best. It's a little bit sort of glib. I know slogans are nice, but I'm not amazed by it. And it's interesting, well, not interesting, but I note that the first time entrance into the criminal justice system in the county is higher than the national average, as well as the high rates of looked after children, which is worrying. But I like the light bulb of supporting care leavers. I just feel I'm looking at the local context, number 3, local context text. And I think it's slightly disappointing that it's become a little political. There's a paragraph saying locally the political leadership has changed with a renewed focus on people and communities. Is that necessary in a document like this? I'm not sure. And I would just jump back to the doctor surgeries. In Ledbury, our surgeries have amalgamated, and it's a little bit chaotic for everybody. And one of the things is that now there's a new website, and but the old information is still up online, and so people have got, there are 2 different telephone numbers that people can ring in to for the surgery, which are both discontinued, and they can easily not realize that there's a new number on the new website. And I mentioned this to the surgery, and they said they've got no control over what is up on Facebook and whatever, on the websites. But surely there's something we can do about that to actually make it easier for people to access the proper surgery. Thank you. Shut up.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Archibald, you wish to comment?
Thank you, Chair. I would just draw attention, given the comments made by Councillor Jansen, to the fact that we have, I think since this draft was dispatched to the committee, we proposed some additions to the commissioning intentions and some of the other statements in the document, some of which draw further attention to the work that's in hand in relation to care leavers and also other vulnerable young people, which of course, even in advance of the further development of an all-age approach, is something that this directorate has been leading on in terms of the commissioning and development of that market. So as you'll know, we're now proposing a framework for the purchase of accommodation and support for vulnerable young people. We've got the second of 2 newly commissioned services starting in February, the first having begun this July this year. A number of other developments. We've also been improving the offer and the service development of all age services around domestic abuse, around carers, including some new provision in recent years for young carers, and in a number of other areas. So just to underline the earnestness with which the council is committed to that all age approach and to reviewing and over time improving the services for key groups of vulnerable young people.
Thank you. And that's coming forward in the next draft.
Yes, we've added a bit more material just to make some of that a bit clearer. Yes,
that's good to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm very relieved to see that at last the transition in care is being widely and positively addressed in quite a major way. I can remember sitting on a task and finish group probably nearly, well, at least 15 years ago, where we first showed up the terrible deficiencies in our systems. It's taken all this time to get to this particular point. And I thank God we have got there at last. Well, we're getting there at any rate. And a long way may we improve. And keep up the good work, I think. The other matter is that we did once have our own care homes, etc., but they were so badly run, we seem to they fell apart rather, and we got rid of them because we were making such a bad job of them. I hope with this brand new shiny stuff we're going to be having, we don't then let everything slide into the slough of despond and iniquity again. But I'm sure with our current team, that will not happen. That is so, is it not?
Not on our watch.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bowen. I think with Mr Vickers at the helm, slow and inefficient is pretty unlikely, I have to say.
I think so too.
I think Mandy and I would find that very difficult to imagine. I would imagine.
I think you'd get a sharp poke in the ribs if you showed any signs of that. I'm glad to say, but not that I think you're going to let that happen. But it is just something one has to remember. Not perhaps for now, when we're all keen and G'd up, but perhaps in 5 years' time, when there are different people in charge, etc., that we must be aware of no backsliding is required.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. I've got a couple of things. I think it's just overall, you know, it is a dense document, but it's actually, you know, even for someone who's not a provider, it's not impossible to get through. It's well laid out. It's a sort of user-friendly document, I think. So, you know, there's a lot of good about it. There's a question that comes in my mind when we talk about alignment with the PCN footprint and the sort of locality-based commissioning, which is what we do about Herefordshire residents who are not within that footprint. This is a perennial issue, but I kind of think that if as either a provider or a receiver of a service, I would look at this document and not know where that cohort falls. You know, so I know it's a kind of constant conundrum, but I sort of feel it might be something that we should try to address head on, perhaps, and say, look, this is what we're going to do for those people, or have that conversation with their primary care providers, and see what that relationship should look like going forward. Another thing that struck me was looking at the kind of proportions of residential versus domiciliary versus you know, other provision, and this ambition that we have, and I think it's absolutely the right ambition, which is to have a diversified offer that is almost bespoke. I mean, it really is meeting a need, and that's great. That there's an element that I would like to see, a sense of the enormous potential contained within the document, which is shared lives, which I know we've taken in, and it is already really getting you know, fantastic traction. All this, but it seems to me that there's still colossal potential there. And the other is the kind of the twin, which is home share. And I've always been intrigued by the potential of home share, and in fact that you could possibly link it up with other needs that we might identify. So in my head, we have a lot of people who might be living singly, and that was another question, is do we know how many 60 plus we have who might be self-funding or might not be self-funding, but who do not have a family? We're making an assumption that everyone's got family, and some people don't have family. So and they are very likely to become you know, vulnerable in one way or another. But anyway, so but we do have a number of people living perhaps in a remote location in the countryside, in a house that's quite big, that actually they would happily stay in, that they don't want to move, but they just can't cope anymore, and they need someone to live with them. And that's the sort of the home share thought, which is then somebody who needs somewhere to live would go and live with them and help support them in their house. But we might actually be able to make an extra benefit by offering that, or by marrying that service with, say, young sort of qualifying social workers or people who want to work in the care industry, and they get to live for free in this house, and they support someone, so it's sort of learning for them, but also it's good for them. And that, you know, I don't know, I can't help feeling that there's some synergy and aggregated benefit in in that area of what would be a diverse offer, but we don't quite cover it in this document. So it's just a sort of, it's a thought. There was a figure on page 15 of the, must be of the actual document rather than the agenda, I would imagine. Yeah, so page 41 of the agenda, page 15 of the document, which has predicted to increase from 77 to 79%, but I wasn't certain over what period that is. So that kind of felt like a statistic didn't quite land with me because it raised more. That's the first paragraph. Have you found that on that page? It is also concerning as potential demand increases. This is predicted to increase from 77 to 79%. But then it's followed by a time frame statistic. So, but it's clearly not the same time frame because the percentage should be completely different. So I don't know. Anyway, just I picked that up as something that maybe needs a little bit more explanation. And I was curious on the previous page, the mystery over the increasing costs over inflation, historic trends, that paragraph, that it can't be accounted for by inflation. And so I sort of, what is it accounted for by then? Is it living wage? Is it pressures in the market? Maybe it doesn't matter. I was just sort of curious about that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I'll have a look at the because I don't think it does rewrite that sentence in terms of the numbers there. That's something, and I think it is really difficult to understand why there is such a cost increase. You know, we've looked at, because obviously the budget for learning disabilities, in particular, as we know, is gone up and up and up year on year. Once you take that fee increase out of the equation, it doesn't really read as to why that is the case. It's felt that sometimes that Herefordshire has been a bit behind some other areas in terms of costs going up, and actually what happens is it stays the same for a while and all of a sudden shunts up, you know, because to try and align ourselves to some, you know, the cost of delivering care. But otherwise there's no rhyme or reason as to why that's happening. So that's something obviously we're looking at. There's a lot of work going around on at the moment with the learning disabilities in terms of that pathway and that development and the offer there. And fairness, you know, to COVID and bring in, you know, there is some potential opportunity there, and we talked about technology within the document, and even now we're looking at how we bring that technology and that, you know, and innovation, particularly around the day services, who seem to be really forging forward with that. In fact, I think COVID's really pushed that agenda, and it's about how we build on that. And I think, you know, within the document, although I said, you know, I hadn't really talked about COVID, I do think there are some elements which do need to be included in it, which it does include building on this good relationship with PCNs. I think it's a really good time to reflect on some of the real good work that has been done over the last 6 months, which includes that and includes the innovation and some of the technology and the offer that people have had in their own homes. You know, some of the live streaming stuff they've done, some of the live class sessions they've all done online. It's about, you know, trying to acknowledge some of that now and build upon that. So, and I think that's something I do need to reflect, you know, in the document. That's as you know, as we move forward. And shared lives, completely agree. One of the things that I think will certainly be a priority. I was talking to one of my senior officers the other day. Is the supported living accommodation offer just needs re-looking at, and I've acknowledged that as part of the work that we're doing in the commissioning intentions, and that is something I think, you know, that we would think the home share one's a really good idea, and it's something I'd quite like to look at and see if we can, you know, build that as part of the offer, because it is an offer, isn't it, and it's having that choice and that diversity across the market. And I think, you know, home share offers is a really good one in a rural county where you have got a high proportion of people living by themselves. So,
yeah. And of course, the intriguing thing about the home shelves, I think it would be particularly strong around self-funders. And the more we build that relationship as being you know, I mean, it's sort of wrapping an arm around, isn't it? It's sort of saying, come on, you know, we can help you. You might be self-funding, but, you know, we can still look after you. And keeping that, getting that relationship really solid. And I know we're on a journey with that, but I can't help feeling that there's an enormous benefit to the whole market of getting that balance, you know, right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly fits within the talk community concept as well, isn't it? You know, how the community can do more to support and how it, you know, building that its resilience. Yeah. Absolutely.
Mr. Vickers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think just reflecting on your comments about that particular element of the report around the historic trends and then this understanding as to the additional costs that have come into the system, I think we need to revisit this. I've just been reading through it myself, reflecting on your comments, and I think we need to revisit this. There is quite good understanding around this. We have, for example, seen a shift in learning disabilities towards direct payments, and we do know that some of those packages have cost the council more money and not necessarily always given a higher level of quality in terms of the care that's being delivered. And I think that there's learning from that, from the early days of shifting to direct payments. The other thing that's not reflected well enough is the higher acuity. So it's not surprising that care costs go up when we're able to keep people living at home for longer, including people that previously would have gone into residential care much earlier. What that means is that when people go into care, they tend to have a higher level of acuity and they tend to cost more money. But I don't think that's spelt out well enough in the document at all. But that they are the kind of trends that probably just need to be unpicked in this a little bit more.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
It particularly makes sense over the last several months where we are looking at, we are interrogating the data that's coming through. We've got quite a rich amount of data coming through, and it will continue to come through over the next 3 months through the discharge to assess process, because for the first time we're seeing self-funders coming through. You know, in more significant numbers, and we are reviewing to see what happens with those self-funders and where their acuity is, and whether they become CHC funded and whether they have more comprehensive needs. What we believe we're seeing is that higher acuity certainly coming through discharge to assess, and we see less people coming through, but of those people that do, their independence is more challenged than I believe it would have been this time last year. But we're looking at getting much better data through this from this period. I just thought you might be interested to know that.
Yeah, thank you. That is interesting. So I see Councillor Bartlett is next, and I just want to reassure Mr. Stead. I've noted that you want to come in, but we'll let the committee chew through it all first, and then I'll come to you if that's all right. Thank you very much, Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you. Yes, I was just going to say, Mr. Stead also had his hand up. I think, yes, picking up on what said actually to start with, because some of the stuff that got me was around the workforce and the ageing workforce, which is actually on page 54. I'm just wondering if we are going to go back into the care market, whether we're going to go back into employing our own staff or whether we're going to be partnering on that front. And also, when you've got the ageing demographics highlighted at the beginning of this document, also highlight the potential issues with an ageing workforce. And therefore, this is considered a priority for the council and providers. And so not only we got some additional costs that we weren't anticipating with the rurality, or possibly were anticipating, but we have to suck up to because of the rurality. And particularly some of those rounds where you've got 1 or 2 visits, but an awful lot of driving in between them. And I know that's been an ongoing concern for our provision for quite a while, hence the added sweetener, I suppose, to try and get people to take on those. But you know, whether or not we're actually going to go into our own workforce recruiting our own workforce again. One of the other things as well that piqued my attention, a bit like a sore tooth, on page 45, when we've got the, bear with, it's talking about CHC, which of course is our absolute favourite topic, continuing healthcare. Noting that in that table on page 45, says despite the ageing, yeah. So it's talking about presumably the, trying to work it out. What it is actually is that 2% is the percentage of people that is continuing healthcare. So it's incredibly low. One would assume that it should be higher, and I think we will all agree that. But I think it just really does bring it into perspective, the fact that we've got an awful lot of residents who are coming back to us looking for home care or dom care, who are theoretically possibly being financed by ourselves, when they should really be financed by through continuing healthcare. And I just wondered how we're doing with managing to put some pressure on that. So number one, are we going to potentially, as Councillor Tennant mentioned, if we're going to have a care home, have our own employed workforce, and whether or not we're still managing to get anywhere with CHC.
Mr. Smith, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I can partially answer that, and I see Steve wants to come in, and I'm sure that Mandy might have some comments around CHC. So just on the first point about the internal care, yeah, of course, if we deliver our own services, then we will, of course, have the natural consequence that we have a workforce associated with that. It is likely to continue with the existing trend that we've already commenced with our Home First function, that those staff would be employed via Hoople in exactly the same way that the majority of the Home First care staff are. So we would have Hoople as the employer of the staff and the council as the registered provider of the service, which is exactly the arrangement we have for Home First and Hillside. So we would continue with that trend, I believe, and that would be the sensible way of doing that. Councillors will absolutely take on board the comments of Councillor Bartlett around the ageing workforce, because as well as an ageing population in Herefordshire, we do also have an ageing workforce, which is a double whammy, really. And of course, there is stuff we can do about that. There are things we can do, but as a county, most strategically, we need to absolutely begin to recruit and attract young families, get people who go to college and further education to stay within Herefordshire and to not migrate to other counties and other cities. And we need to ensure that strategically the average age of the population in Herefordshire does need to reduce, and that's not at all being harsh or controversial. It's a simple fact that in order to maintain the workforce in Herefordshire, we do need to have a less ageing population, because we could reach the position where there is no workforce and there's lots of people that need supporting. So we do need, that's a big strategic issue for the county. And of course, we work really closely with Skills for Care, who is the national body for the care workforce. And interestingly, the national representative for that also is in Herefordshire. And so I know Lynn very well, and we have quite a lot of discussion around these issues. It is a big part of the economic recovery of Herefordshire, not just post-COVID, but strategically, that we need to attract more young people to. And that will be absolutely supplemented by economic migrants, no doubt. Hopefully that will continue. And of course, will potentially also be also supported by refugees and our abilities to support people who want to relocate. But ultimately, we do need to attract a workforce. And most importantly, of course, where there is an existing workforce, where industries aren't doing as well, such as retail and leisure perhaps at the moment, we are actively marketing the care sector to those individuals, because of course, many individuals that work in retail have excellent customer service skills, are enthusiastic and committed and hardworking, and with an intensive set of retraining can become incredibly good care workers. So that's absolutely an opportunity for us. This post-COVID and of course the likely recession that might follow COVID is a big opportunity for the care sector, which we should exploit. And of course, we are actively marketing the care sector to people who may become unemployed due to the downturn in retail. So we're absolutely attacking it in the right way. So I hope that gives you some assurance, and I'm sure that Stephen and Nandi might come in on the other points that were raised.
Do you want me to come in, Stephen, on that? And I'll just come in initially on the continuing healthcare. I mentioned a few minutes ago about there being this opportunity of the retrospective work that we undertook through the COVID period, the initial first wave between March and September. All the people that we accommodated or have a care plan for through that period is funded or were funded. There was 311 people, I think it was, in all. And they're a mixture of people who would normally be single agency funded, that's local authority funded, some that should be funded CHC, and some that will be self-funders, or some that would come out normally as having a joint funded health and social care package. We're currently halfway through that retrospective assessments. So we know of the first wave that we've got 63 out of that 303 so far that are self-funders. We're working with the CHC team to see doing assessments each week. We have a plan to undertake those so that by the time we get to the end of March, we will have completed all the retrospective people, as well as obviously our usual daily business. And we'll be able to absolutely map every outcome from that. We'll have a really good idea based on NHS predictions as to how many per 100,000 would be expected to be full funded, and how many would be expected speaking joint funded or single agency funded. So that's going to really take us forward in our negotiations and discussions with CHC. We're also looking at a single project working towards getting an algorithm, the company that would provide us with an algorithm which would establish an external process as to whether somebody would come out as CHC or health funded. So we're looking at that project right now, which will link very well into the retrospective cases that we're going through. So there's a clear sort of attempt. There's no doubt, you know, you only have to look at any of the figures before, and I'm sure it'd be for the last few years, you could see that absolute slump in people coming out as not CHC funded. And there are people here, Councillor Swinslehurst, I've talked to you, Councillor Bartlett, I've talked to you about those very people, and especially about the self-funders being a really unknown. It doesn't come out in all the stats as to, you know, just how many people we know. We know of the people that we work with who comes out as CHC, and we know, as you know, that can be quite a battle in itself. But self-funders on their own, they're very much on their own when it comes to this process. But so the first time we'll have a much wider view of what's going on across the piece.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful. I think this may be a recommendation. I know we have an ongoing interest in CHC, and we're still awaiting for a response from the CCG from the scrutiny that we did previously on trying to explore the anomalous numbers around that. And I think it would be really useful for us to have a you know, as and when post-March you have these figures to hand and you've made some progress with the algorithm, to just give us a written note or something, keep us cited on how it's progressing, and hopefully at some point we'll also get a written response from the CCG on the discussion that we'd had previously with them over that, because I think it's a really important area for us. So thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Does anyone else want to come in on that? No, it's a Councillor Bowen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. The matter of recruiting people from the other sectors, it could be very advantageous. But can we provide these people with a decent salary and a decent career progression? I think that's important. And the other thing, yes, it's good to retain people here, but also it is good to let people go off and get experience elsewhere, as long as we can tempt them back to Herefordshire when they've become even better qualified than they were when they were here. I think we shouldn't get hung up entirely on trying to retain people here almost against their will, but allow them to go and gain wide experience and then come back and spread their good knowledge and their enthusiasm back here again, home again.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the recruitment and retention across the piece, though, it's not just here, but you know, across a number of our activities, is absolutely crucial. And I don't know, and I turn to the committee members for their input here, whether there would be some way of building a recommendation around that, or around having a briefing or some kind of members workshopping session or something around recruitment and retention, whether we're looking at the care market or social workers. You know, this is the same across the two major directorates, and it's a point of fragility and something that we might usefully look at. Councillor Selden.
Yes, if I may say, Madam Chairman, might I just say that we've looked at this right through my career as a councillor. It's always been a bugbear. It's always been a major problem. We are a peripheral county, and we have to work extra hard to retain people and get.
But what a county!
What a county it is! We've got to let people know what a county it is, and encourage them to come here and make use of it and be useful to it.
Well, of course, the tide has turned, but we have people now, you know, wanting to come here because it's not London. Councillor Selden.
Thank you. Yes, we are attracting people into the county at the moment. In fact, if you look at the direction of travel with property prices in the county, that will be reflected in what's happening. And that's, of course, in lots of ways, is another double-edged sword. Recruitment and retention is something that we really do need to crack, but the county becomes more prosperous, then it will automatically solve itself. Now, making it more prosperous with the advent of the university and our own social work academy would make it really attractive, and I think there's one way of doing it. But I think the market has a way of evening itself out, and I agree with Councillor Bowen. We've been talking about this for ages and ages. But I think in the end, it does even itself out, and we are at a point now where the market will, I believe, come in back in our favour, and with the people at the helm, as has been said before at the moment, making it an attractive career proposition to come and work and live in Herefordshire, I think we're probably onto a winner. So I thoroughly recommend that one.
Thank you. Right, is the committee content? In which case I will move the discussion on, and I shall invite Ian Stead, the Chair of Health.
Hi, thank you, Chair. That's kind of you to let me say just a few words. Firstly, I'll just pick up on Paul's comments. We're very pleased that our contract with you is extended, and we've developed a very close partnership working arrangement, and we're looking forward to that to continue. The other thing I'll just say as well, that we were also very impressed with the work that your team did in COVID, particularly to support the discharge arrangements and the care home difficulties. And I made those comments in a number of national meetings, and there was sort of incredulity from other participants because I was about the only person saying how good the arrangements were. And, you know, obviously what we want to see is that spirit and that partnership approach continuing well into the future. And, you know, that's obviously comes out in this part of the document that we're looking at today. And just a few comments on this. Looking at Laura, we have sent in some detailed comments, which you're nodding, so I certainly won't go through all of them by any means. Just to pick out one or two comments. We were impressed with the breadth of it and the wider approach to commissioning and the market, and we commend that. Inevitably, one or two areas that we'd like to see amended or improved. We had some concerns in the carers section about lack of notification support for young carers. I did some voluntary work on that a few years ago, and it's quite shocking the effect that being a young carer can have on your education and future. So we would like to see that increased and extended. A constant issue at the moment is that a lot of services are starting to rely on information technology, and we just want to point to those potentially excluded by that. There are quite large numbers of people in Herefordshire, old and isolated, where lack of access to the internet is a factor. And we see that talk community hubs could be something that would well work into supporting and improving that. And then just to mention about PCNs, which are obviously developing, and comments about possibly their lack of resilience at the moment. I think we agree with that. We see that though as early days, they are still developing. And again, we see that primary care networks work well with the talk community agenda because they would strongly support each other in providing local support to local communities. But overall, we're very pleased with this, and we'd like to continue to work with you to develop these services in the future. And you know, we do have a really good relationship with your team, and you know, we're very happy for that to continue.
I could just sort of respond to Mr. Stead, Chair. That's okay. Thank you for those kind comments, Mr. Stead. We do have an excellent relationship with Healthwatch, and I have to say, in other councils, that isn't always my experience. I've had some difficult relationships with Healthwatches in other places in the West Midlands, and it's the relationship with Healthwatch in Herefordshire is a great balance of challenge, which is absolutely where it should be, but also pragmatic support and understanding of the system and the constraints that we work within. So it is a great relationship. It can never be too cosy because, of course, Healthwatch are there to hold us to account, quite rightly, and to hold the system to account. So there is an element of that, but I do believe that the relationship will flourish now that the new contract is in place. And we work really closely with Ian and Christine and other members of the team, and it's to the benefit of the customer within Herefordshire without any question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. So now I'd like to invite Councillor Pauline Crockett, the Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing, to contribute.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First of all, thank you to the team for this in-depth document and the presentation today, and for answering the questions that have been posed by the committee from the debate. So that was a really good start. As mentioned from the beginning of this presentation, this is not a statutory obligation, but it was identified by the local authority as being good practice. So again, it's not something we have to do, but we want to do it. The document acknowledges the changing needs of our residents. This includes everybody, adults and children. So the all ages concept continues the theme for our county plan. We recognise the challenge in these austere times, but costs have to be considered, and better management needs to be considered in that way. The learning from the past and present have enabled us to plan for the future, although we are aware that these are only predictions. And finally, I'd just like to thank the committee for their debate, and we will welcome their recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. And finally, Mr. Vickers or Mr. Smith, or both of you, if you care to make a further contribution.
I'm happy for Paul to take on that. If I can,
So over to you, Mr. Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Vickers. I'd like to thank the committee for scrutinising the document and the very, very practical, elegant questions that are absolutely on in relation to the document, and give us the steer on how scrutiny would wish us to move in terms of a direction. They're very welcome. They're very well informed, and in fact, it's really encouraging to me that members of the committee are so well cited on the very important issues in health and social care within Herefordshire. That's really encouraging to me, that you can ask us questions in the detail and push us on the points that you've done so today, and no doubt will continue to do so. The comments that have been complimentary about Laura's work, particularly in the team's work and Ewan's work, is appreciated. I have to say, I can claim no credit for this document. It's all been Laura and Ewan's work, and it's really impressive to see that the team have produced something that's been so well received. Most importantly, this document, which isn't a statutory document, but we absolutely are committed to continue to publish on an ongoing basis, is just so important to how we do business, because ultimately, I take the view very strongly that as a commissioning function, if we don't engage on an almost exhaustive basis with our providers and with our customers, and we don't design services around their aspirations, their needs and their input, that we end up designing and commissioning services that are complete white elephants and nobody wants to use them. And there's nothing worse about public funds than being spent on something that nobody wants to use. And so I do think it's really important that it's an organic document. And I was very insistent on this when we spoke to the team 18 months ago about the start of this. What we wanted to avoid at all costs was a 20-page text document that nobody read, sat on a desk and nobody took any notice of for the next 5 years, and then we produced another one. Because it is an organic market. It changes as the well-being of individuals moves on. COVID could never have been predicted, but it's put an absolute knife through traditional social care and health thinking without any question whatsoever. So I'm really pleased by the results. I'm really pleased by the actual product. I believe our relationship with the provider markets is exemplary compared to some other parts of the UK, and that is the attendance at provider forums every week is 90% of providers, which is off the scale compared to many other experiences. And I believe that's as a result of Herefordshire Council's support for the sector, the system support for the sector, and the integration that's been achieved across Herefordshire, which is again incredibly impressive. So to sum up, I believe the product is fantastic. I think Laura and Ewan and the team have done a great job. The support of scrutiny is appreciated, and hopefully we will come back to you in 12 months' time and tell you that we have begun to deliver on a number of the commissioning intentions, and that we've organically developed the document, and there's a new version available on the website because things have changed and we've adapted to that change. So I hope that's a good summary for you as councillors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith, and it is a very good summary. And I must say, this, throughout the debate, the stuff that's come forward, the detail of the level of engagement with providers, the commitment of the team is just exemplary. As I was saying, we're kind of drawing parallels really between strengths-based and science safety, and it's all trending in the same direction. It's about diversity and a broad base of offer that's the right offer, the right thing in the right place for to meet the need, and it feels right. But this is for a document that is not statutory. This is really necessary, and I congratulate you on it, very much. So thank you all, and thank you to all the officers. So any other comments from Cabinet member or officers? Thank you. So we'll move forward to recommendations now. So the committee has been asked to consider the draft market position statement 2020-2025 and to determine any recommendations it wishes to make to the executive. So, Mr. Ball, have we captured anything as we've gone along? And then I'll ask members if they have any formulated recommendations that they would like to come forward with.
I'll just explore a couple of things. I'll put it on screen. I'll read them out first, and obviously if members want to see it on screen, I'll do that. But if I read out what I've got so far. The committee welcomes the development of the market position statement and recommends that opportunities to engage with service users be explored further to inform development and design of specific care and support services, with a written briefing note provided to the committee on progress in 12 months' time. The next one, that the importance of the social value elements be made more prominent in the document. C would be the document be updated to reflect the current positions in terms of the new arrangements for mental health services, learning disability services, and the adopted dementia strategy. D would be explicit reference be made to the Council's intentions for the development of multi-bedded care home and or extra care facility and any associated workforce implications. E, that consideration be given to clarifying the situation for Herefordshire residents that are not served by the footprints of primary care networks. F, that consideration be given to synergies and diversified offers such as home share to meet the needs of people needing care, both those funded by the council and those funding themselves, and people prepared to offer support in exchange for accommodation or other support. G, that the statistics included on page 15, page 41 on predicted increases in dementia be clarified. H, that identified trends such as higher acuity be reviewed and supported by additional narrative where appropriate. I, that a written briefing note to be provided on NHS continuing healthcare, including the development of a related algorithm and progress made on retrospective cases. The other points that we made were perhaps for the committee itself in terms of its work programme, perhaps bringing issues about resilience and business continuity in the care home sector and in primary care networks. Perhaps that could be included in the work programme. We have been talking potentially about a task and finish group on the COVID-19 system response, and perhaps that could be looked at as part of that. And also there has been talk of potentially of a member or members seminar around talk community, and I wonder perhaps if that could pick up issues of recruitment and retention as part of that briefing.
Thank you. I was wondering if you want to just pick up, not as a recommendation to this document, but sort of maybe a recommendation to ourselves to get a briefing from Mr. Vickers as and when the full service work that he's doing has got to an appropriate place, because it is kind of an important bit of the jigsaw, falls prevention and response. But I'm not, that doesn't really fall within this. It was part of the conversation, but sort of something that I would like to be cited on as and when it comes
Mr. Vickers is just indicating you might want to respond on that.
Yeah, certainly we can provide that for you, Councillor Swinglehurst. I mean, the thing about the falls prevention work, it is system-wide. I'm the SRO for the system, that's absolutely true. The work has already been scoped. We're focusing very much on understanding the population need, mapping and understanding the current resources that we spend and invest in falls prevention and associated activities. And then after we've done that piece of work, we're going to agree a clear model for our whole system. And it's interesting listening earlier to the comments. I think it was from Councillor Selden around resilience. Part of our plan around resilience is most definitely to look to integrate pathways where it makes sense to do so. And this is one area where I feel that there are opportunities to do that. And so really then focusing on shifting investment, and as was mentioned earlier, from a react and respond model, which we tend to have now, to a predict and prevent model where that's appropriate to do so. I'm happy to share that scoping document with you now, and perhaps you can then consider if there's more that you'd like scrutiny to look at, because the scoping document does have quite a lot of detail within it.
I think that'd be very helpful. Thank you. Has anyone got any Councillor Bartlett?
Yeah, just on the recommendations, and thank you, Mr. Vickers. That sounds an excellent to look at that document. Two that I brought up that I thought were important was on page 51 around the refreshing the mental health, because it's written in the past tense. We're going to move to a provider. We have moved to a provider, and with the dementia strategy, it needs to be refreshed into language that reads that we do have a new provider now, and we do have a strategy, rather than so it's just refreshing that on page 51 so that it reads correctly now. And then the other one was on the commissioning intention 3. It shouldn't just be dementia and autism. It needs to also be referred to learning disabilities as the complex and challenging behaviour. So they were two that were missing, things that definitely need to change. And I was a little confused about the service user perspective coming back in a year, whether it was actually just that, or whether the overall recommendation was, because they're going to be reviewing this annually, that we should be having a briefing note on this that included more information about the service users' perspective. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I'm looking at the chair, and she's looking at me.
No, it was my impression that it was an update on the progress more generally, and not specifically on the services. But I thought we had also captured somewhat your comments on the changes to the mental health provision.
Have we captured that? Right.
Yeah, but
okay,
I'm not
sorry.
sure that the point over the learning disability cohort
Yes.
in the
Commissioning intention 3.
Yeah, and the commissioning intention 3,
yeah.
I think that possibly had slipped through.
And
Mr. Archibald, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, I think in the provisional amendments we've already made, we've already included a wider definition of that area of challenge and complexity to include, I think, learning disability and also other groups, potentially those with complex substance use needs and so on. So I think we certainly will address that so that it's a broader definition.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Tillett.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small point, and at one point you did suggest that you might be grateful of a steer from us regarding the recruitment and retention issue, and I appreciate Mr. Bohr has encapsulated it into possibly into a task and finish note for ourselves rather than for the report. But I hope perhaps Councillor Selden and Councillor Bowen, who have been discussing this for years, will forgive me. But for those of us who haven't been discussing it for years, perhaps a very brief briefing note on the figures as are available of the scale of the problem, possibly retrospectively as well, so that we could see where the trend is, if it is would be helpful for those of us who are a bit newer to the argument. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tillett. Yes, I still think, maybe that plus, since this is just asking the executive to consider, that they consider an all-member briefing plus workshop, perhaps, or something along those lines. That to just because it's a very important thing, and it's cross-cutting, goes across all the directorates. Mr. Vickers.
Yeah, it is interesting and actually really important. I agree, and it's worth an area of focus. But it's interesting also to just reflect on the changing picture, really. So adult social care have worked particularly hard with our workforce development team for the recruitment of social workers, for example, and we've seen some great success in bringing in newly qualified, a high intake of people on the ASYE programme. And we've also seen more and more people coming to Herefordshire, I think building on the good reputation that Herefordshire has got. So pressures in social workers, for example, for adults has dropped off, but pressures for occupational therapists, for example, has replaced it, and actually is much more significant than perhaps adults than adult social workers ever were. And of course, then you do have the wider challenge for the care market. As was already pointed out earlier, it tends to be a relatively low paid salary at the entry point, and it competes with a lot of other wider low wage economy. So it is a big challenge for us across the whole sector. So it is, I think, worth reflecting upon it and spending a bit of time upon it, and anything that scrutiny can do to help us to develop and those plans would be most welcome.
Thank you. I mean, I don't see it as being specifically adult wellbeing scrutiny, because it's also, you know, it also impacts the Children and Families Directorate. That's what I mean. It's one of those cross-cutting things. So we would, the recommendation would have to be suggesting a mechanism that is laterally working rather than, yeah, that's hence my kind of ideas around, you know, I mean, it's only a suggestion to the executive that they might, you know, put it out there. And we already have the scoping document that's come through. How efficient is that? The full scoping document is already in my inbox.
We don't mess up that, Councillor, you know that.
No. Speedy. So that's marvellous. Have we got any other contributions for recommendations from the committee? Mr. Wall, could you just go through the recommendation that Councillor Bartlett was a little uncertain about over the mental health, changes to mental health provision?
And would it be helpful if they were on the screen so we could see them as well? So might help focus on us impacting on what they are. If it's
bear with me 1 second. Well, we just
get that, not your emails.
That's what I'm worried about. Yes, bear with me just a moment.
Also for the visual learners rather than the auditory.
Okay, hopefully you can see some draft recommendations there. I've just changed A as I read previously to reflect that the written brief notes on the general progress with the matters identified in the statement, but that service users have been engaged in the development and design of specific care and support uses. That's changing that. The element that we discussed around mental health is in, and services and learning disability services is in C there, that it would be updated, be refreshed to reflect the current positions in terms of the arrangements of mental health services, learning disability services under commissioning intention 3 and the adopted dementia strategy.
No, because they're two separate.
It's two separate recommendations.
Yeah, they're two separate. So the mental health is it talks on page 51 that we're going to get a new provider. So that needs to be refreshed, full stop, and then learning disability services.
Yeah, and that's a separate recommendation.
Under commissioning intention 3. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, I think what Mr. Archibald was saying, that's a change that's already underway, along with broadening the
that's right. And the dementia, the dementia should go up there with the, so mental health and dementia. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Selden?
Yeah, forgive me. I'm just wondering, at the beginning of this debate, we learned that this is going to be a fluid document that will have regular updates. Do we want to see every update that comes in, or should we just review it once a year, perhaps? I'll put that as a question to the committee, if I may, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Selden. For myself, I feel annually is sufficient.
I would agree.
I think that's reflected in A, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the point being, Jenny, that if we recognising that this was drawn up before pre-COVID, and probably around the time that the change of provider for mental health services was being pushed through, that's going to be there, and perhaps in the next iteration we'll see that how well that's going.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the interval as described. I think if we have any cause in the interim, that there's nothing to stop us asking to see it in the gap. So I think we'll stick with that as written for now.
Okay, and if I just scroll down a little bit further, so members can see the other recommendations.
Yeah, so I suppose I is a little bit highbrow, I suppose, in terms of what it says. It might need a bit more simple language that people who weren't part of the debate understand what that means.
Yeah, that was page 14 of the document of the market position statement. So yeah, so if you put yeah, so there's just there's more explanation underlying that increase than is in the document currently, and that probably be helpful to bring that out. Yeah, great. Yes. I'm not, I think on recommendation K, I'm not sure how comfortably it would sit alongside the talk community briefing. I think that's a separate thing. So I would kind of leave the briefing workshop, and I do acknowledge that that would be efficient, but
I agree, Chair.
yeah.
I think it might. I mean,
with a view to
specifically that. Why are we not doing specifically anything else that might fall under that?
Well, exactly. So I think it's a separate thing. Recruitment and retention, because it's cross-cutting. That would we just say that be interesting to know what's going on, what where we're doing well, where we've got fragility, but also that the executive consider the usefulness of an all-member workshop. I think a workshop, sort of look at it from different points of view. And so that all members can be appraised of the challenges around that. Surprised. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, Chair, that looks good to me.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So can I have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations?
I'm happy to propose them, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett, and a seconder. Councillor Bowen, thank you. I will now ask committee members to vote on the recommendations by an electronic vote. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members confirmed.
Chair, there are 7 voting members and they may vote now.
Thank you very much. Please cast your vote either for, against, or abstain. Please ensure you press submit after selecting the option for which you are voting.
My submit. I've broken my submit button.
Yeah, me too.
My button's broken.
Oh no.
I got
Do we need
two
to do that?
outstanding votes. Do you want me to
Do you need to relaunch the poll?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, hopefully that'll work for you guys.
Okay. Have another go.
Okay, all votes are in.
Fantastic.
And unanimous in favour for all those recommendations.
Thank you. Please can we readmit the non-voting attendees? Welcome back. Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 8, the committee work programme. The committee members considered potential items of business and priorities at the scrutiny work programming session on Friday, the 20th of November 2020. In summary, it was suggested that the work programme should comprise 11th of January 2021. And please note this meeting has been brought forward a week to accommodate subsequent meetings in relation to the budget. So 11th of January 2021, the 2021-22 budget, and a scoping statement for task and finish group on the COVID-19 system response. 29th of March 2021, urgent and emergency care to include elements on minor injury units, Think 111, and the West Midlands Ambulance Service, and the Carers Strategy Review. An all-member seminar in April, date to be confirmed, on Talk Community, and an additional meeting in early May, date to be confirmed, on mental health and learning disability services, 2021-22. And this is subject to any changes arising from new governance structure to be determined at the annual council meeting in May 2021. Out of hospital care, including elements on the integrated discharge care pathway, care home settings and NHS continuing healthcare, domestic abuse strategy. It was also suggested that updates on the following be provided in the form of written briefing notes: Herefordshire Safeguarding Adults Board Annual Report, Sexual Health Service, Substance Misuse. Clearly, it is a full programme, but are there any other matters that committee members would wish to add to the work programme at this stage? Thank you. So appended to the report, you will note a schedule of the recommendations made by the committee and the responses received. This has been updated to reflect the recommendations made at the last meeting in relation to suicide prevention strategy implementation and the responses received. And I would like to thank Ewan Archibald, Head of Community Commissioning and Resources, and Councillor Crockett, Cabinet Member Health and Wellbeing, for their prompt and full response to the recommendations on this important topic. It was very timely and is appreciated. Thank you. So recommendations. Do we have to do that as a recommendation, Mr. Bohr, or is that we take that as read?
If perhaps we could just for the record, if the committee could confirm that the work programme as outlined, okay, and that the schedule of recommendations and responses be noted, that'd be helpful. So if we could,
thank you. We're also going to have a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation on the work programme. Thank you, Councillor Ironson and Councillor Selden. I will now ask committee members to vote on the recommendations by an electronic vote. Please can non-voting attendees be moved to the breakout room and the number of voting members be confirmed.
try not to break my button this time.
Yeah, try, just go steady with the submit button.
Chair, there are 7 voting members and
Thank you very
they
much.
may vote now.
Thank you.
All votes are in, and that's unanimous in favour to approve those recommendations.
Thank you very much. So please can non-voting attendees be brought back into the room. Welcome back. Right, agenda item 9, date of the next meeting. Please note the date of the next scheduled meeting is Monday, the 11th of January, post-Christmas, hopefully post-COVID as well. Thank you to everyone attending and for your contributions today. I formally close this meeting.